recording for people.
Yep. I don't know. Am I a host or am I not? Yeah, I didn't have that
Let me
yet.
see if I put that up for you yet. There we go.
All right, cool. Hey, what's up, Corey? Good, thanks. So, Corey, is it? Are you officially an entrepreneur now? Going good. So, are you officially no longer outstanding? Congratulations. That is it's awesome to hear. I've seen your post speaking, already doing some speaking engagements, speaking out to the several different groups. That's outstanding. We'll give everybody no, that is absolutely outstanding. Let's see.
What's going on with you, Scott?
Finally seeing the sun here on the East Coast, man.
Oh, yeah.
Finally seeing the sun, man. It's been like 40 days and 40 nights of rain, it feels like.
It's actually been, I've heard it was actually warmer out there than San Diego for this past weekend.
Yeah, it's been pretty nice finally. We've been due. And I guess your alma mater, they're getting ready to graduate. They had the Blue Angels up here.
Yeah. I've been seeing that Herndon climb all over the news.
I guess this time of year, they gotta have that.
I was like, it must be a slow news day. We do that every year.
A new set of mids doing it every year, though.
Yeah. But yeah, let's get started, and then while we're doing this, maybe people can shout out, see if anybody else wants to join in, let people know that they can tweet or share on Facebook to let people know we're going to get started on Blab. And I think when you share it, Blab sends out like a 30-second GIF of what we were just filming. So if there was a good part that you guys just saw and think it's worth sharing, definitely let people know on Twitter or Facebook. But I think most of you guys know who we are. I'm Byron Chen, founder of Success Vets, and wrote Barracks to Boardrooms, here to help veterans with their transition after the military, whether it's their career or their lives. And then I'll turn over to Scott over here with Command Your Business.
Yeah, so I'm Scott Fuzzle. I'm the host and founder of Command Your Business, focused on veteran entrepreneurship, but also from the transition standpoint. After leaving the Army, I've been in the corporate world for almost 16 years, working in various Fortune 500 companies. So bring that perspective as well as the veteran perspective to the conversation. And, for anyone that maybe is watching this, maybe not live, watching the recording, because I know a lot of people go back and watch these recordings, make sure and you go and check out, Byron's book. We'll have the links out there. And for anyone that wants to get on our list, go and check out either Command Your Business or Success Vets, and you can see how to get on the list. I know several people that are here live have gotten notified of when we've gone live. So feel free to jump on and get on the list and get notified. We do these we've been doing every couple of weeks, so we're looking to do some bigger things past this. So please join and jump on the list. And thanks everyone for jumping on live.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. Yeah, and so for today, Scott and I were talking last week about what this week's webinar was going to be about. And so I wrote Barracks to Boardroom last year, came out in January. And since then, I've been fortunate to work with a bunch of people working on their salaries. And it was nice because I got to workshop the concepts in the book and continue to refine it. So in this one, I really wanted to go over some of the things that I've learned since then, some deeper tactics, and really just to go over some of the things that like keep popping up when I help people. So I guess before we start off, I should talk about like how the book came to be and why I talk about salary negotiation at all. When first off, I've been bargaining and negotiating my whole life. I think it's something that I grew up with just in my culture. I mean, my mom used to take me to flea markets and things like that and garage sales. And we weren't rich growing up, so a lot of things that we were doing, we were making sure that we were getting the best deal for. And that's sort of how I got started. But that could be very different from salary negotiation. So after I left the Marine Corps, I was in my corporate career where a bunch of other veterans were hired. and we were just chatting maybe 3, 4, 5 months into the job. And, like all employees, we were chatting, and we started sharing information about what we learned about other employees. And we found that there were people within the same position, same peer group, that were making a lot more. I was in a medical sales job, and it was kind of shocking to us because at that point, we were familiar enough with the job to realize that it wasn't a matter of skill or experience. It was something else entirely, and we were trying to figure out what it was. And the answer was it was people got a higher salary if they negotiated it at some point in their careers. And the position that I was in, it was a very competitive one. Competitive as in there was a lot of turnover. People were always, trying to pull us away from this company to other competitors and things like that. So in that time frame, I was able to negotiate my salary actually a bunch of times. And I learned it from mentors. I learned it from doing my own research and then applying it to these salary negotiations. And I even did so when I was leaving the company. I put in my 2-week notice and said, I'm ready to leave now, but we could still negotiate. And I actually was able to get a bonus before I left and stuck around for about another extra month. So I think by that point I was pretty confident that I had understand the concepts and could apply them pretty readily. I haven't heard of too many people who negotiate their salary to leave their company.
Well, and one of the things I want to hit too, Byron, is that even though we're, the topic and what we're talking about is salary negotiation, I think the skills that Byron is going to talk about apply outside of just strictly salary. I mean, there's certainly other things that you can negotiate, benefits, vacation, lots of other things, even aside from salary, that are negotiable and skills that I think can apply across a pretty broad spectrum of areas. Don't you think? Yeah,
definitely. And there's in fact, that's a good point, Scott. I talk about salary negotiation, but I actually don't think that people should always be negotiating their salary. I think most of the time, yes. But one of the things that I've had the opportunity to do while I was doing the research was consult with a bunch of people who are going through their own salary negotiations. And the thing that came back up the most wasn't the fact that they had trouble negotiating the salary. They just didn't even know how to evaluate it, right? So to me, it's not salary negotiation. It's probably better to call it salary negotiation skills, because you have to be able to evaluate the offer within the context of the total job market and make a decision about whether or not you're going to negotiate, and then how you're going to go about it. And really, I mean, that's step one a lot of people are missing when they come to me and ask me for help. Most of the time they come to me and they're like, and I ask them pretty much immediately, what do you think you should be making? Or what does the market say you should be making? And they're never really sure. I usually have to help walk them through the research. And so to me, that's a skill that'll help, anybody. You don't have to negotiate. You can decide whether or not you want to take a job based on how fair you think they're treating you. But you have to understand what the market is. And I think that's been the shocking thing for me, is that a lot of people have a lot of difficulty with that research.
Oh, and there are a lot of tools out there now that maybe weren't available 10 years ago that give you some pretty good intel on what the market is willing to pay. If you look at sites like Glassdoor, right. I know LinkedIn is already, I've been asked a couple of times about my role. LinkedIn is already starting to go down that path. I believe they're starting to collect some salary information. I honestly don't know if that's live yet, but I can see that going live very soon.
Yeah, it's that's another thing I learned, is that I mentioned these resources in the book, Glassdoor, PayScale, Monster Ladder. I mean, you can go through a lot of them, but even then, I found that people were having a hard time understanding what's a reasonable range for their salary and how to research it. So maybe we can jump into that, and if for the crowd, I mean, this is kind of an informal presentation, because honestly, these are things that I'm workshopping for a course that I'm building on salary negotiation. So, I mean, I would love to hear, where your major questions are. But one of the things I've found is that people have trouble with the research, or people have trouble with the economics of salary. So there's two things that go into it, two key things. One, there's just the market for the position that you're being interviewed for. That, like I said, you can go with PayScale or Glassdoor. But what I tell people is you need to research different variations of the job. Different companies call different positions different things, and one, it might be, for example, project management, and another one is program management. If it's project management in manufacturing, that's very different from project management in, let's say, a software company. And you can find all these things, but these search engines like PayScale and Glassdoor aren't that smart yet. You kind of have to feed them a few different options for you to get a good estimate.
Well, and then they can be skewed too. I've done a little checking on my own, and they can be skewed if there is a limited amount of data and there is only one person that may be at a particular early entry or very long in that career, and it shows for that position at a certain company that it's hey, this range is, or this salary is $75,000, for example. Well, if there's only one person doing that versus an organization that has a lot of people that have been using the platform, and you get a very good average, right?
Exactly. And let me see if I can. Blab just came out with this recently where you can share screen. Let me see if I can do that here, because I've actually been, one of the things I'll do when I'm working with people and going over their salary, I'll create a spreadsheet to collect all the data that I've been going over. So let's see if I can pull it up real quick. You guys can tell me how it looks. Scott, can you see that at all?
It's pretty, at least on this end, it's pretty small. If you can zoom in on maybe zoom in on Excel there.
Yeah, let me see if I can. Do that real quick. Let's do 200%. So we'll only see parts of it, but here, is that a little better?
Okay, I can see that a little better. How about everybody else?
Yeah, so I'll just talk through it really quickly, because now I can't see what anybody else is doing, so I'll just go through it. And so
sure.
Scott,
I'll feed you.
Let me know if there's any questions.
Sure.
So this was for a project manager position, and this is only like a half done spreadsheet, but you could see that I'm going. First of all, I put in the position or the title, because, like I said before, there's a lot of different names for these positions in different companies. So I've had project manager in manufacturing, I've got engineering project manager, manufacturing project manager. And then I go to, in this next column, if I go to a site, or actually no matter where I find it, I'll usually find a range. So if I get a range, I want to know what's the low, the high, and the average. So you could see here, I've written down what site that I get this information from. Mm-hmm. And then on the next column, what's the salary that I get? And there's a pretty wide range here. You can see that there's anything from as low as $40,000 up to $95,000 for this job. And then farther down, from these other sites where I got, let's say, the high on Monster, I found, there's a $128,000 position for this salary for this position in San Antonio. I'll check the location. I want to know where these salaries are being reported. Sometimes they only give you this. Yeah, the country.
Definitely critical, right? If you're looking at a salary like in Cupertino or New York City versus a Kansas City, definitely a big impact on your quality of living on that salary.
Yeah. Well, and you can see right here. So I got this information from PayScale, and it's New York City versus the rest of the United States. And on average, even the low, average, and high salaries in New York City for this position are higher overall than they are for the low, average, and high in the U.S. in general. So that's good to know. If I'm going to be taking a position in that area, or if I'm leaving a position in that area. Then there's the year that this information was collected. If there's degrees or other information associated with that position, I make sure to note that, especially if I have it, because I want to know, if I fulfill the minimum requirements.
Sure. Probably even with that, and Corey had made a point earlier about the service versus product. From a project manager standpoint, some may require both a degree and, for example, some type of certification like a PMP certification.
And then I actually put that in comments at the very end here, okay, because when you're starting to get into that sort of information, it could be very stratified depending on the industry and the company and the region. Mm-hmm. So, in my comments, you can see there's everything from lean manufacturing to Microsoft project to, being in the industry for over 15 years. And this information I just took from the job. Some of them I just took from the job requirements that some of the companies post up with the salaries that they post for it. I also wrote down if there was a bonus information. I wrote that down. Number of reports here is, how many people are reporting this information. And you can see some of this information is, just one person or one listing for this job, right? I'm gonna close this and come back into the okay. So it looks like I'm back. So really quick. So that's, like I said, there's two aspects though when you're researching the salary. On the one hand, I need to understand the market. And that includes, where the region is and things like that. So that's one part of it. But then people, get that information. They're like, well, now what do I do? And I thought you use it to your advantage. I'm assuming that you have a job offer or you're close to one, or you know like what the company is going to offer, right? So let's say you get a job offer and the company says, we're going to give you, the base salary is $40,000. And you did all this research and you're like, well, there's a bunch of salaries that are in the 60,000 range. Well, let's make this a more extreme example. There are a bunch of salaries in the 100K range, similar background, similar level of experience. What's the deal? You might just find that this company has an anchor for their salaries. They just don't pay competitive salaries in the industry. If you go in and ask for 100K, you're probably not going to make it. Like they're going to think you're crazy. So you have to consider one, what the market is, and then two, what's the anchor point for the company, and that's whatever they set out in their in that initial job offer. If it's 30, 40% below, you're not going to be able to. You are most likely not going to be able to come up 34 or 40%. I've done, out of the dozen or so salary negotiations this year, I've had one that was above 20%, and that was unique partly because it was like startup related, right? That some industries where the salary isn't well defined, there's a lot more flexibility. But in most corporate careers, those are pretty defined. So if a company comes in really low, they're either unable to pay you more or they have a reason. Another example is Google. Google doesn't pay their contractors above market rate. You would think that you get a really high salary, but if you're coming in as a contractor, you're going to get what the rest of the contractors in the industry get, because Google understands that this is a very nice position for contractors. So if you get it and you could eventually get a long-term gig at Google, they're not gonna ask for people to. They're not gonna pay people more for something like that.
Have you seen kind of in your research and working with some of the clients that you've worked with, have you seen a difference in if someone is going in from certainly from a contractor versus a full-time employee? Do you see differences there?
It's strange because it's really dependent on the company. One example, it's not exactly this similar to that, but I had a friend who was she's a forensic scientist, and so she had a position. So she was working for mostly government agencies. So she was interning actually at one, I think, state agency. And she was applying for the state police at a different agency. And, most people say for governmental nonprofit type jobs, it can be very hard to negotiate. And it was. But I told her, she should give it a try anyway. And she hadn't received her master's yet, but she was about a few months away. She had to finish her thesis. And they came back with a salary offer, and it was lower than her current job. And I said, so what do you lose if you negotiate? So reach out to your friends, because all your classmates are now in these exact positions. See what they're getting. Theirs were definitely a little bit higher. So she mentioned that in her counter offer. She said, hey, I'm in a position where I know my peers are making more in this industry. This is the range that I was sort of expecting. What can we do to work towards something that's fair or closer to the market? So they came back to her and they raised the salary. I think it was $150 a month, which is not much. It was around a 40K salary, and they raised it about $150 a month. It wasn't huge, but then they let her know, look, we're giving you the highest salary we give somebody who has a master's degree with no experience. And we know you don't have a master's right now, but we understand that, in this negotiation, we have to come up a little bit, but this is the highest that we can give you. So that was nice, right? Like, the job requirements might say that she needs to have a master's, and she doesn't, but by negotiating, she got that, they gave it to her, And here, the other nice thing was now the salary was actually on par with the one that she was currently getting. So now she has, before she would have just said no and, maybe left off that opportunity. Now she has the opportunity to say, yes, or she has the opportunity to make that decision, which to me, I mean, that's what salary negotiation is about. It's not about being greedy. It's not about trying to make the most money. I think that's the end result, but it's really trying to see, what's going to be most fair and what's going to give you the most opportunity. And she was able to do that, and she was able to make the decision. And that was the job she wanted. So she was able to take it without feeling bad that it was going to be lower than her current job, right?
No, I think those are great points. And it really is, I've had, similar experiences, kind of being on the hiring manager side, where, again, and you talked about it, there is maybe there is a set range or a max, if you will, based on a job description, but for the right candidate, and if it's, it may not be 10 or 20%, but if it only takes another 5% to get that person in the door, you're going to do what you can to make that happen. And it may be, right. One of the things from a business standpoint, I mean, they may have, a large corporation may have very hard and set ranges for a specific position, but there may be things they can do from a signing bonus standpoint, or other things where they could move, do something to move the needle, because, we have to remember as well, if you're a candidate, that business has a problem that you're there to solve. And if you're not the one, they're going to have to restart the process all over again and really do that.
Patrick, I just saw a question about where to search for market salaries. VisaDoor is another good one. Actually, let me go through my process. So I have a list of. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. I'll read these off really quick. But if you do a Google search, you'll be able to find these. But these are the places that I'll usually visit, and it actually goes pretty much in this order, because PayScale is really the top one as far as the most amount of information. Let's see. I've got payscale.com, visadoor.com. Well, and I'll read these off really quick, and then I'll go back to talking about some of them specifically. Glassdoor, salary.com, monster.com, LinkedIn, Just to Network, Indeed, Quora, Simply Hired, Career Bliss, SalaryList.com, Career Builder, Reddit. So just most of them are just salary search engines. So if you're looking for whatever position you put into Google and then put salary, those sites will come up. But a couple of the special ones that I wanted to mention. So visadoor.com is an interesting one. But it depends on your industry and your position. But if companies sponsor foreign workers for visas, so project manager in IT or something like that, they actually have to post the wage for that position. And so if you go to visadoor.com and you're looking up somebody in marketing and Facebook, you can actually see what they offer, foreign employees, and they usually have to offer these foreign workers, a competitive rate in the U.S., right? Like, why else would they come over here? And not only that, if they make several of these offers, they list every time how much that offer is for. So you can get a whole range of salaries for some of these positions. So I recommend VisaDoor, especially one, if it's a very a major industry, major position, and two, if it's at a major company. Those are the ones that are most likely going to have that sort of information. But the other thing I wanted to say is Quora, LinkedIn, and Reddit. You might not always think to check those places, but Quora and Reddit are pretty much online forums where people ask and answer questions. And if you do a quick search, sometimes people talk about their salaries. So I was helping somebody else with their salary negotiation, and they mentioned that they were working at the position was at Boeing. And what's interesting is Boeing is a huge company, bunch of probably people that like to go on a site like Reddit. And there were people that talked about their salaries on Boeing, right, anonymously. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. But they also talked about the different tier levels that people get hired at. So just by searching on Reddit, I was able to find out, what the tier levels are and how Boeing assigns, compensation based on whether you have a master's or something like that, right? All information that, before going in, now you have an idea about what salary you should expect. Quora is another one. I mean, people just ask about, what the salary is at different companies in Quora. And so I'd say use all of this information to, one, come up with your expectation of what you think is fair for the market. And then two, use that as your basis for a counter offer when you present it to your company.
And I think it shows too your interest in the role, and B, that you're interested in the role, and B, you're also understand your value, and you have done your research and you understand the industry and your value. So I think that says a couple of things to the employer as well.
Yeah, and Corey mentions a good point. Keep in mind, companies, hiring managers must consider the entire cost of benefit packages, not just the salary. And so, when I'm working with people, like I ask, like, okay, is it a bonus? Like, how do you add up everything that you find? And then I'll pick apart different pieces of information. So that spreadsheet that I showed before, one of the two columns that I've written down, one was like bonus, another one was benefits. And so this is, if you're negotiating, something that you can use to your advantage, right? Because that information is not likely to be readily available to even that hiring manager. Like, the hiring manager knows what's benefits they give, but they might not necessarily know what other companies or competitor companies are giving, right? So if you come in and say, the salary is fine, everything else is fine, but hey, I'm used to seeing in this industry a benefits package where the 401k matching is closer to 5% versus 2%. Is there some other place where we can make this up? You won't necessarily get it, but that's how I would word it, right? And this this is going to be kind of a tangent, but one of the things that people are always asking is, will I lose the job offer? Will I lose the job if I try to negotiate? And I'm like, well, if you do it the right way, you shouldn't. If anything, if you do it the right way, you still might, they still might tell you no, but they should respect you more for it, because it demonstrates that you have a good business sense and you have good communication skills. And I relate this to, my time in the military. Let's say I was trying to plan something with my Marines. There are some Marines that have very good tact and professionalism, and some that don't. So if somebody says, hey, sir, you're an idiot, he might be right? He might be right, but I might react in a negative way, right? I still might take his advice, but at the end of the day, when it comes time for an evaluation, I might say, this person lacks professionalism. Contrast that with somebody who pulls me aside and says, hey, sir, from my experience, this is what I've seen. I think that this plan has some challenges that we can overcome if we do this, this, and this. We're still going to agree with whatever you say, but, I suggest we tweak some of these things. One, even though unless I'm a very unreasonable person, which I don't think I am, I'm going to, one, appreciate that, like, the way they approached this problem. And then two, when it comes time to evaluate them, I'm going to say, one, they were able to speak up for their principles, what they thought was right, and do it in a way that was very tactful and professional. It's the same thing with salary negotiations. If you do it that second way, anybody reasonable is not going to fire you or take away a job offer. And if they do, it's probably good that you learn that before you continue to lead, before you take on that job or you continue to work with that company. And I've, in the past year, I have been involved with one pretty contentious salary negotiation where it went back and forth. A couple levels of hiring managers or up to the VP level had to get involved. And it actually, the guy didn't get his raise, but he wasn't fired either. They just said, unfortunately we can't, we're going to try to make you happier in other ways. They tried to change his work schedule a little bit, but he didn't get fired. And that was probably the most contentious one that I can think of, where we were like, hey, I was helping him go around certain people and starting to say, look, we're going to need to pull some bigger hitters in. And, that's a tough conversation to have when you're saying your direct boss, like, you're not solving this problem for me. We need to go above you.
Yeah, but that is a very good filter, even from if you're trying to get a job with an organization, especially if you're trying to go to an organization and they rescind an offer just because you try to negotiate
Yeah.
the salary. Then, to your point, that may not be the right place for you.
Right. And just a caveat to that, some people are like, well, I need this job. And then I would say, well, we'll take the job. Like, salary negotiation is something you do after you feel comfortable enough to negotiate. If you have to take a job, if you are in dire straits, you need money, like, that salary negotiation isn't something that comes into play. But for most people, when they're searching for jobs, they have a few options, right? Like they're going through the process and then they get this one and they're like, oh, I need to just take it. When they're like, you've been working through interviews for months and you've got a few options. Why just allow them to, why just take what's given to you? You actually have some options. So.
And Corey's had some good points here. Do not leave your salary requirement blank on your application, and I think that goes back to Byron's point earlier of doing your research and understanding what the market's worth. But then I think, Byron, you may have talked about this on a previous live stream as well. Is that that's something that's certainly negotiable, but you may filter yourself out if it's an online application and it's blank. You may never even get the call back.
Well, yeah. So just to speak on that a little bit, Patrick, there are a few things. There are a few different ways they can ask that question, right? Like they could just ask, "What salary are you looking for?" If they're asking you what salary are you looking for, then at that point you should really all this research is great because you should have a good expectation of what salary to put down. And I would put down an average salary because what else would they expect? I mean, if they're putting out that salary and you put one that's average for the market and then if you don't go further along in the process because of that, I mean, you already know they're going to pay below, market rate salary. I mean, unless you're hard up for a job, put the lower end of the market. But if they're asking you what salary you're expecting, then I would put the industry average. And then what I would do is once I get an offer, that's when I'd evaluate it and see, what about everything else? Total compensation, the benefits and the 401 and the retirement package and the vacation and paid time off and look into that and say, and then we could still have the conversation. Just because you put your expectations earlier doesn't mean they change, right? And then I'd have the conversation at the end, with tweaking it to make it more fair. Now, if they ask you what your prior salary was, you put down your prior salary. If they ask you your compensation, you add up as all the things that you can and estimate some things and put that down. It depends. And like Corey said, it's a screening question. So you don't want to leave it out. You don't want to put something unreasonable because, you don't want them to screen you out. You're trying to, it puts you in a tough position because you're putting something down that is kind of tying your hands. In negotiation is where you provide information that it's really not going to help you in any way. It's going to help the other person because they can use it to anchor you to that number, or now they know a little bit more about what your expectations are. They might not need to budge as much, but it's the game that they're playing. So
and I'll bring it.
You can with it.
I'll bring another perspective to that as well, Byron. On from a salary range standpoint, depending on the level you're looking for, if someone goes too low, that may screen you out as well. A, there are some HR issues, but B, that may be a screening to the hiring manager or to the potential employer that you're not the level of person that they're looking for. They're looking for someone who has a certain level of experience. And if the typical industry is, $50,000 and you're coming in at you saying your salary expectation is $25,000, that may screen you out the other way and say, hey, you're probably not the right fit. We're looking for someone who is a certain skill set, and salary is one of those things that could be a determiner.
Right.
And certainly if from an industry standpoint, if they bring someone in too low, it can cause HR issues within the organization as well down the line. Once you do come on board and you find out that you're 75% lower than your peers, then they've got other issues on their hands.
Well, so this, this is a great reason to do a webinar like this, guy, because there's general advice, and my general advice would be honest and understand what information you're giving up when you do it. But there's not much you can do about it. But now that we're in this back and forth, let me give you some more specific advice. When I work with people on their salaries, I ask them like, well, do you know what the general salary is? If you haven't, let's do some homework before you submit this application. And then if they don't know, I'd be like, well, don't forget pay scale. If we have time, go reach out to somebody at the company who's a friend, if you happen to have a connection, or somebody who used to work there, if you can. If you can't, ask other people in the industry to find out, that specific information, right?
And I think that goes back to, we talked about earlier about LinkedIn, on a previous one. Hey, there's plenty of people you can find out, people that have worked at an organization, and a lot of people be willing to reach out. Hey, that worked previously at XYZ Corporation in a similar role.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised, especially if they're a veteran, what they'd be willing to offer up.
Yeah. So Nick had a question about on the entrepreneurship side, how do you pick the best range for a startup? Yeah, that's and is that Mike from ADHD Think Tank? I think that's who it is.
Yeah, but, that's Pirate Mike.
Yeah. Checking out other, calling other companies helps. Actually, nowadays there are a couple. Nick, if you check out, I think AngelList used to have a, and this is really early stage startups, like we're dividing equity amongst the co-founders kind of thing, or we're bringing on an employee. They're talking about, there are a couple calculators that you can use, one or two online. And then I'm trying to think, what are the other sources? But the way I would kind of look at it is, it's actually, this is where you have the most opportunity to succeed and most opportunity to fail, right? Because really, because it's a startup, because it's so wide ranging, because it's dependent on what skills you bring in, you can really argue a lot more than you can if you're in a industry that's, been around for 20 years and they've got tens of thousands of employees and they're like, this is what we pay people. Like, this is set. With a startup, I mean, it's kind of wide open within reason, right? And so when you go in, it's much more about value. Like, what value do you bring as a founder, or what value do you bring as whatever they're hiring you on as, right? Like, if it's a company that needs somebody technical and they don't have a technical co-founder, like, you're pretty much charging what you can, that they're willing to, what they're willing to pay for you. And but let's say you bring some different skills. Let's say you bring marketing experience, some project or some product development experience. That's just the conversation that you have to have with those founders. And you know what? They're going to be doing the exact same thing, because they're not going to have an idea. I mean, I've only negotiated with one startup, and it was or helped somebody negotiate and for a startup job, and it was still kind of like a regular corporate job. It was just at a startup, but they were getting hired as a regular employee, So actually for that one, one of the things that we negotiated was the company was pretty set on how they were going to divide equity. And what we negotiated was, instead of getting a director title, he asked for a VP title, right? Even though he wasn't going to be in charge of any more people, he was like, this company is going to grow it. And I'm at a position where I'm going to be managing and hiring people, give me that VP title, which, he didn't get any more equity. He didn't get any more salary for it. But in Silicon Valley, VP at a startup is an important title that he could, transfer and use elsewhere if he ever leaves the company. It just, and you know what, he was going to do that type of work eventually. So it's like, why not give me that title now?
So any thoughts on 100% commission salespeople? I'll talk a little bit about, different industry, but, I've certainly seen, in third party or in my industry, which is kind of a consumer goods industry or professional power tools, or however you want to label it. But there are, in certain instances, we will use outside third party reps that are 100% commission. So there are manufacturers reps where they may be working for 100% commission, but they may be working for multiple non-competing industries. So they may work for 100% commission for you, Nick, and then they may be in a competing industry. So for example, in the 401k space or in the investment space, you may have someone that you could pay on commission, but they may also work in, maybe 100% commission in the life insurance space. I mean, there may be some folks out there like that. I don't know what others have seen, but I know that there are certainly folks like that.
Yeah, Nick, I'm wondering on your question, is it, what should that commission percentage be, or like thoughts from the hiring side, or because the person's 100% commissioned. I mean, I've kind of seen it two ways. Either you're in an industry where the turnover is so high that they can get, any, and it's really high, turnover is really high, and the barrier to entry is very low. So something like if the turnover is worth the low cost. Well, so okay, actually, so this kind of works for both. So I haven't negotiated or helped negotiate in a 100% commission scenario, but actually the industry that I was in, some people were on 100% commission. So I kind of see two things. Either the barrier to entry for that position is low and turnover is high. So I'm thinking of like telemarketing, some of those like door-to-door sales type jobs, right? Like they train people up and like go sell, and you're 100% commission, which is honestly kind of shady in those types of industries. And then on the flip side, you have something like medical sales, where the employee makes so much money for the company that the employee is like, I don't want to be on salary anymore. I'd rather just take a 20% commission, and it'll, I make a lot more money that way. So honestly, on the high end side, when we talk about high end sales, from what I've seen, employers have that discussion with the employee when they cross that threshold. So for me, for example, they had a base salary and then the commission was 10%. But at some point, I'd be making so much volume for the company that I would go to, 0 base and 20% commission, right? Which you're like, oh, that's a lot more risk. But for me, as an employee, I'd be willing to take it because that 20% commission is a lot higher. I'd be making a lot more than what the company limits me to with the base and 10%. So I don't know. I don't really know if that answers your question, Nick.
To me, it almost sounds like, in the online marketing industry, almost an affiliate, or depending on what they're selling as well, if it's an information product or what it is. I mean, to get to bring additional sales in, maybe offering an extremely high commission to have people incentivized to bring.
And on the medical sales side, it was strange because not only did these employees, a lot of them actually became indirect employees, as in like they weren't paid by the company anymore. They became their own business that was contracted by the company, and they were paid that way. So it was all commission, contracted out. It worked out for different tax purposes. Like now that they're self-employed, they had different things they could expense. The company's paying less in payroll, but the guy's still making a buttload of money. So it's a really weird industry. I'm thankful for my first career choice. Not that it was a great job, but because there was so much turmoil and turnover. I mean, I learned a lot, and I got to see a lot of different things and see how people really, fought for what they felt was fair, which was great to see. Like, it was kind of like a full-on free market every week, and it's kind of rough and tumble, kind of cutthroat. But that's really where I learned, why it's important to fight for your own interests.
Yeah, that is. Corey does have a great point. I know you guys are going back and forth, spending a great deal of time vetting commission employees. Behaviors and actions are 100% different than salary employees. And certainly depending on how you structure that compensation, that is 100% going to drive their behaviors. If it is, for example, on just top line sales, and they're going to do everything they can to drive top line sales, even if the products or services they're driving are low margin, but they know they can drive a very high number, but the company makes less and less on that type of product. They're going to drive that to maximize that earnings for themselves versus someone who is on salary or has a different set of guidelines is going to be a very different set of behaviors.
So Nick, you're talking about you were thinking specifically of your industry because you're an entrepreneur. You're contemplating taking on other advisors. I haven't done it from that perspective, but I have talked with people that have, are kind of in that space where they're hiring other people. But if I were to look at it from what I know about salaries, one I would consider when you talk about advisor, I'm assuming that somebody who's a professional, as in, they have certifications and that they, that which means that they have other options, right? They don't have to work for you. They can work for other similar companies in their industry. So, either look at what the market average is, it's the same research, and figure out what you're willing to pay. Or if you can't pay that much, then what's the value add, right? Because people are willing to work on commission if there's a lot of opportunity to do well. And I would think if you're going to offer commission, then look at what different tiers might be, where you would be able to, it would justify what you're giving them. Sure, you might be giving, let's just assume, this is just a number I'm randomly throwing out. It's for their first 10 sales, you're giving them 20%. But once they go above that, you're giving 15, and above that, you're giving 20. And maybe you cap it at a certain rate, at a certain amount, where it's $200K, which, you might be like, well, if he's making all these sales, why would you cap it? I mean, that $200K might be something that, the rest of the industry doesn't pay. It's worth it for you because he's making that much money for you. And that's one way to look at it, possibly if you're thinking about,
yeah, no, that's Nick has said Merrill can pay a lot more, but Corey comes in as well. I think as a startup, and you can offer something that that Merrill employee can't get.
You know what? I actually think that is a value add, because I mean, Nick, I know a little bit about, for people listening, I know a little about Nick because I interviewed him for my podcast. He started sort of an investment advisory firm, and he did it because the company that I was working at before, literally came out and told him, stop caring about the customer so much, right? And he was like, well, what industry am I in? And you know what? There are other people that are looking for that in their daily lives, where they're like, I want to work at a job where I like the people that I work with, and they believe in the same things. I mean, that's the reason a lot of us went into the military, because it definitely wasn't for the pay, right? So I think that actually is a value add. You have to sell that when you're interviewing something, and be like, hey, this is not Merrill Lynch, right? But we're going to be honest, and it's going to reflect your values if that's what if that's what's important to you. But on the other hand, I would also say you probably have to offer something else, right? Like some sort of opportunity for growth. Maybe if the person's not looking for that and that's good enough for them, that's great. But it might have to be an equity discussion if they get, if they stay with the company for so many years. But honestly, Nick, I think yeah, free t-shirts, people like swag, right? If you're, sometimes people want to be a part of a startup, like just because that's different and exciting. And it's the opportunity to put on their resume that they're at a startup. A lot of these startups take interns, right? People that they pay very little and say, we'll take you on long-term later on. But I think the best person to talk to about something like that would be a mentor in the space. Because I'm not sure how to evaluate, the financial strength of your company. And I think that also, changes how much you can pay somebody as well.
Mike's got a question about, what about employee owned companies? And I guess from a salary negotiation standpoint, I don't have much experience. I don't know about you, Byron, but I would guess that there is probably a lot greater transparency. Similar to when we served in the military, you could go to any place and look at someone's rank and years of service and their duty station, and you can tell here's what their salary is. I would imagine in an employee owned company where the employees are the stockholders, it may not be completely transparent, but there may be instances where there's a little bit more transparency and you can find out a little easier.
Yeah, one of the bad things about writing about salary negotiation is I've become pretty negative on the way most companies approach compensating their employees, and it's unfortunate because I almost wish people didn't have to negotiate their salaries, right? Like that they could just be paid fairly, and that their salary would increase and at least keep up with inflation over the years. But if you look at the research, I think middle class incomes haven't increased since like the 50s or something like that, right? Like if you adjust for inflation, they've remained pretty much about the same. And so, but there are actually some companies that do a great job of this. One of the cool companies that I found when I was doing my research is Buffer. Buffer is a tech company. Some of you guys might be familiar with, but their salary is completely transparent. They let everybody know, what each person makes and how they value it. People can argue like, oh, I don't believe in this or that, but this is their algorithm that they've set, and this is what everybody gets from the CEO on down. Another interesting company that I found was Zappos. Zappos, not so much for the salary, but how they hire. They actually, if you make it through the whole interview process, they will give you, or at the time when they were doing this, they'll give you a bonus if you don't want to take the job. So they'll give you $10,000 to not take the job, right? Because they wanted people that truly wanted to work there. They were hiring for a certain culture and things like that, and they knew that people can kind of, fake their way through the process. Some people might be really good at it. They wanted to make sure that they had the right hires, so they were actually willing to pay people not to take the job. Oh yeah, and Corey brings up another great point about focusing on other benefits. Here's another thing about salary negotiation that I try to remind people, and I always tell them to set their expectation and goals beforehand. What is exactly do you want now that you know what the industry average is? Do you want to get paid at the top of the industry? Do you want that, or do you just want to work from home, right? Because that might not be a salary conversation at all, but it's still a negotiation conversation potentially with your employer. What would make you the most happy? What would be the most fair to you? So if you were used to working, 1 day a week from home at your old job, and you want to continue that at your new job, but the company doesn't offer it, that's something you're gonna have to negotiate. And you could say, hey, I think the salary is fair and it's great. I'm ready to come on, but I'm more familiar with, and I'm very productive when I have an extra day at home that I can take care of administrative tasks. Is that something that we can, compromise on? Or is that something you guys would be open to? To me, that has nothing to do with money, but has everything to do with what you think is fair, and it might not cost your employer anything, but it could be huge for your quality of life. And so, those things are things that you want to think about as well.
Now, what about, Byron? And I know we haven't touched on this strictly from a salary standpoint. I know you've done this research, and it was pretty eye-opening to me. But if you're going into, maybe you're transitioning out and going into, and getting hired somewhere, and you don't negotiate your salary, what is the potential impact in some of the research that you found? That from a dollar standpoint, what could that cost you?
Let me see if I can pull that up real quick.
Because I know you did the research, and I remember when you did it, it was pretty eye-opening to me, in the hundreds of thousands of dollar range over the life of your career. If you don't, kind of go from the beginning, look at and negotiate your salary, it could have a potential impact of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, right?
Right. If you do so there was a very specific study that found that if a 25-year-old negotiated their salary, and it was a difference about $5,000, and they never negotiated again, but they calculated in raises, and anytime somebody changed jobs, they got an increase in salary. What they found was by the time they retired, they had it was a little over $500,000 difference in earnings over your career. Really, that's a matter of compounding interest and taking regular raises. The number that they used was 5% difference, pretty much each year, which I think is a little bit a little bit liberal. But even if you take a 2 to 3% increase, it comes out to between $200,000 and $300,000 over your career. So I mean, to me, if you don't negotiate, if you're not at least thinking about negotiating, you're leaving that money on the table. Let's tie that in with two other important points. One is that most research has shown, and CareerBuilder research survey has shown, that the majority of employers discount your first their first offer. and I think the number was about 57%. One, because they're kind of expecting a negotiation, and even if they don't, I mean, it's not. It's a pretty good deal if somebody's willing to take that lower salary. So you can pretty much assume if you're in a professional field that that first job offer may not be the highest that they can give. I could be wrong, and I've been wrong before, but 9 times out of 10, it's not the highest that they're willing to give you. And so it's important for you to at least do the research and at least be of the mindset that, it's you need to be defending your best interests.
Couldn't agree more from seeing the other side of it as well. Typically, there's going to be some, in most cases, room to move unless you've done your research and you're a good candidate and have gone in and really set what that role should bring. What your value is. You've done the research. You've looked at Glassdoor. You've seen other people that have gone into those roles. So that's certainly something that is important and could have a real impact. But if someone has come in and they've done all the research that Byron has talked about, they understand the range and their value, they know that they're worth the top end of that range, then in those cases, if you come in and you make an offer that is at the top end of the range, that may be, hey, they know we've got to max out our offer to get Byron. So they're going to, if the top of the range is 60K, Byron's done his research. He says, I'm worth 60K and has kind of stated that. They know he's the right person for them. They're going to come in with that offer of 60K because they don't want to lose Byron. They understand he's a phenomenal candidate and wants to come in. So that's what I've seen.
Here's the other quick point that I'll make, and I'll probably only talk about it here in this webinar because it's not something I would suggest. It's definitely not something suggested in the book, but if you're good at salary negotiation as a skill, like that can make you more money than being good at your job, right? And that's, I don't want people to get that wrong. You should be good at your job, right? But if you're good at salary negotiation, it could bring in much more than what people would recognize, for you being good at your job. So what I mean by that is, if you look at salary negotiation as a skill, not all employers are great at salary negotiation. It kind of depends on who's on the other side of the table too. One of the things, for example, is when I tell people to lay out their counter, I don't tell them to lay out everything good and bad, right? Don't say that, I found that in this region the salaries are this and that's more similar to this, but on the high end it's also this. So would you guys you don't lay that out. You lay down the information that's reasonable and advantageous for you. It's up to the other negotiator to come back and say, well, I don't believe that because for these reasons, right? And what I like about negotiation is it's almost it's like a competition, although your goal is collaboration. But I like to think of it as like, how do I present this? Like a debate or an argument, like that's going to yield me the best results. If one of the guys that I researched when I was doing this negotiation, he over like a 6 or 7 year period had negotiated about 20 times with the companies that he worked at. He was one of those examples where he was an excellent worker, but he was also an excellent negotiator. So anytime pretty much his responsibility or job position changed, which it does a lot in a startup, he went back and negotiated because he's like, look, I oversaw this change and I'm going to continue to do excellent work. We need to adjust, how the company compensates me, right? And for most people, they wait until the performance review, which, I suggest in the book that's when you should wait for if you're going to be negotiating while you work for a company that, that's usually the best time to negotiate. But if you have leeway, if like this guy where he's a startup and there wasn't really a clear performance review scheduled, he negotiated anytime that he saw the opportunity to negotiate. So yeah, it's a skill in itself that's worth developing.
So definitely, I know you cover a lot of that in your book, and definitely
Yeah. Well, yeah. And so we get into some advanced stuff in here, but honestly, for most people, you don't need to be advanced in salary negotiation. You need to understand the basics. You need to understand what other people are trying to do to you. You have to understand, what it's like to convey yourself professionally. But that's about it. I mean, do some research, be able to communicate that, and be confident enough to ask. That's all you really need. Like I tell people, you don't need to buy the book. You don't need anything more than that. But I find that a lot of people come to me for help because they want reassurance, because they want to what's the word? They want to game out all the possibilities. And I'm willing to work with them on that. That's perfectly fine with me. But at the end of the day, like if you just know those three simple things, you'll do okay. You'll find out you're much more successful than you're not. Because here's the other thing: most people don't negotiate, right? So you're more likely, if you do it properly, for the company to be like, all right, this is our 1 in 10 person who negotiates. He's a fine communicator. Why don't we just go ahead and we don't want to put up a fight with him. Let's give him the money, and then we'll take the loss here, but we'll take the win with all the other people that don't negotiate. Because I think the number is about 51% people don't negotiate ever, like at all. So
awesome. And I know Byron said you don't need the book, but if anybody wants to go check it out, I've got a preview of it. The link is there. Certainly if anyone is watching kind of the recording of this as well, I believe the links are still live. So I would recommend going and checking that out as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's on there's the Kindle version, and there's also the paperback. The Kindle version is much faster for you to get, and it's like $3.99. So I've always told people, like, if it doesn't make you money, like, feel free to, I will refund it to you. But I'm pretty confident now. I've there's only been one person that I couldn't in the past year where we couldn't increase their salary, and they were able to actually lessen their workload. So I call that a wash. But you learn some basic fundamentals, and it definitely helps in your career.
So any other questions out there?
Yeah, we're hitting about an hour. Don't want to bore you guys, but one of the other things is, what I like about these webinars is, I can see who's coming on and who's got questions. So I should recognize any of you guys if you ever reached out and had a question, if I could help out. I don't mind doing that for this group. Yeah, if you shoot me an email, I would. Definitely would. But the other thing is, like I mentioned, I'll be creating a course. It hopefully should be coming out soon. But I'll definitely let this group know in case anybody wants to get an early preview of it before it gets all nice and fancy. And there will be some discounts and some extra bonuses as part of that. And Scott just wrote a sign up for our future conferences. We're looking to do a big one coming up. Hopefully we can get some heavy hitters to come in and speak with us in this live webinar format.
Oh, that's great. Jennifer's going to get some for their career coaches. Yeah, I think it's a great resource for veterans, Jennifer. Yeah,
Jennifer, if you send me an email, I could probably get you like a wholesale or a wholesale deal for that, especially if it's paperback. If it's the Kindle version, I don't think I'd be able to. I think it's already a good price. But for the paperbacks, we could probably send you a bunch if you need. So reach out whenever. Yeah, it's funny, Nick. I have reached out to Transition, the advisors or the people that work on base, and I've gotten some no's. And I think it's because I'd be taking away from their time and their work that they're being paid to do. So I don't know. I haven't always gotten a great response from those guys, but yeah, I love to talk with students, especially people that are graduating, things like that. Always want to go to libraries or something to talk about the subject. So,
and definitely something as Byron puts his course together as well. I would recommend anyone that knows folks out there in the transition world or that do veteran transitions, that maybe don't have the time to let people in, but keep Byron on the radar and send send them his way once that course goes live, because that's going to be a great resource that everyone needs that type of information. And like we covered here today, it doesn't have to be just salary that you're negotiating.
Yeah. But yeah, I hope I didn't talk everybody's ear off, but it's been something that I've really enjoyed learning more about and practicing and helping people with for the past year. Because one thing I've noticed, some people are like, they're really uncomfortable doing it. They really wish that they could just work for a company that would pay them fairly. But once we negotiate that salary, like none of them have given that money back, right? Like I've never heard anybody say, "Oh, well, I don't deserve it." So, and it's after that, I think that they're much happier about the that choice. So, yeah, if you guys like this one or you guys have suggestions for other topics or other guests, please let us know. Sign up or just tweet at us. Both of our for both Scott and I, our handles are up in the top here.
And make sure you follow each other on Blab as well. I know there are connections in here within the group, and we've said that before. But some great resources in the room, and Corey and Jennifer, Nick, Mike, Patrick. Definitely make sure you guys follow each other. Please feel free to share these. Stay live after these sessions end. So please make sure that you share these with anyone else, because they can go back and watch these. And I know we've had, I know we've both received kind of feedback. Well, people don't want to use their own personal Facebook or Twitter. Well, for the next one, just tell them to go and sign up for it takes about a minute to sign up for another Twitter account. So go create a Blab Twitter account. Starting construction companies. That may be another good topic. I know we've talked about we've talked a lot about veteran transition and going and working for someone else. That may be certainly Patrick, another topic on entrepreneurship. And I know we've Michael, I know we've had Byron and I both talked to you on here before, but that may be another topic when we talk our entrepreneurship here in the very near future. And Corey's got some great resources at the IVMF EBV as well. But that could be certainly for another show. We talk, entrepreneurship, what I focus on at Command Your Business. Byron is living the entrepreneurship life. Corey and Byron and several others here as well could have a wealth of information. So,
all right. Well, hey, good seeing everybody tonight.
Awesome. Take care, guys. Don't forget to sign up.